Welcome, dear participants, to this second webinar, as Pau mentioned. Today, the topic is choosing the right AI technologies. For those of you who has been at the webinar on Monday, you know we have had a look at the use cases, which use cases in customer service will be present. Today, we'll be looking how to actually implement them with which tech. First and foremost, please let us speakers, myself and Mercedes, introduce ourselves. So my name is Dennis, as you know. I'm a data science consultant and the founder of a data science consulting company, Enterprise AI Consulting. I have done more than 30 projects, mostly on ERP and CRM data, such as SAP, Oracle, GT Edwards, Salesforce, and so on, in different functional areas such as purchasing, quality management, customer service, production planning, and so forth. Yeah, that's my profile, and I'm going to be one of the speakers today. Mercedes, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yep. Well, I'm Mercedes Rodriguez Garcia. I'm Google Developer Expert for Assistant. That it's kind of recognition that Google gives to the experts in their technologies, most exactly Dialogflow and Actions on Google. And I used to work, well, I've been like 4 years right now in the chatbot sector. I used to work in one Spanish company called 1 Million Bot. I was head of technology there, but I quit the job last year and started as a freelancer. So right now I'm working as a conversational designer and chatbot developer and as a freelance, and also I give in training company. In-company training and consulting for chatbots and voice assistants.
Great. Thanks, Mercedes, for this introduction. So now let's have a look at the agenda, what we're going to be talking about today. So first and foremost, I would like to give you a short recap, really just a couple of minutes about what we've had spoken about in the first webinar, if you haven't been there or if you need refresher. After that, we will dive into the main portion of the content of this webinar, AI technologies for customer service. In the third part, we will talk to Mercedes about her experience in chatbot building, conversational design. She will tell you about different technologies that can be used for building a chatbot. And of course, we'll talk about the next steps after this webinar. So let me jump right in. So the recap, what did we learn last time? Well, the first question was why actually AI and why today? And I have presented this same slide last time that according to the estimates of PwC, a consulting company, the contribution of AI to global economy will be $15.7 trillion until 2030. Considering that today's GDP is around $84 trillion worldwide, you can see that it's a pretty huge contribution. One of the important parts why AI is so thought for. And the other thing, it's a new part of the presentation, so to say. I just found this video a couple of days ago that I want to show you. Here, the important thing is to listen at what's happening because, short hint, the voices in this video are completely auto-generated by AI, just to give you an impression why it is so important because of the quality it has reached so far. Let's give it a listen, just a couple of minutes. All voices entirely computer generated. Can you hear me well?
I can still hear voices. Sometimes, if I'm lucky, I hear her. And it's like she's right here with us. Her warmth, her love. I miss her. I just don't understand. What did I do?
Faith. There's something you need to know.
Mom.
So yeah, I just wanted to give you a short introduction because I didn't want everybody to start crying. It's a pretty sad kind of conversation that they have on this video. But still, I think you have caught the incredible quality of the voices that have been generated by the neural networks. This video has been published just 7 or 10 days ago. I just have seen it yesterday, I believe. and decided to include in the presentation to give you kind of the real-life impression of what AI is currently capable of. So AI is the first part of our topic today, right? And the customer service is the second part. I also presented this slide, different views on customer service, to see it as a business process, as a conversation, as a document, or as a profit and loss statement line. There are different views on customer service, and they all inspire different use cases in terms of artificial intelligence and data science. So that's with it. The other thing that we had a look at last time were the use cases. That was the main part of the previous webinar. And again, just to recap, we had a look at predicting resolution times. We had a look at urgency detection and ticket tagging, as well as voice analysis, upsell prediction, and chatbots for better response time. So chatbots have been a topic of a previous webinar as well. We had more business and use case driven look. In this webinar, we'll have a look at chatbots again from the technology perspective. And of course, if you want to write any questions, please use the Q&A. We will look at them at the end of the webinar. So with that being said, let's have a look at the tech, at the juicy part of what we're going to be talking today. And first and foremost, I wanted to give you kind of a big picture view on technology landscape in the eyes of a data scientist. That's an important distinction because currently there are so many different technologies that it's not really possible to show them on one slide. So this is the technology that is important for a data scientist, AI consultant working on customer service use cases. Just let's have a look. I have categorized them into three portions. One is data sources, another one is data transmission and storage, and the third one is data analytics and AI. All of these three pillars are important to actually execute a data science project in your customer service department. As a data source, for example, could be your IT service management system, ERP, CRM, or manufacturing system. It can also be IoT or industrial IoT data that you're using there. And of course, you can also collect data from the devices of your employees or your customers. These are different data sources that can be used. For data transmission, well, for example, on the floor or between the different stations, network stations, you can use the new 5G technology that everybody is, of course, excited and concerned about at the same time. However, it's not going to be the main focus of today's conversation. I included this one to just give you a little bit perspective on landscape. However, what we will be talking about will be the extract, transform, load pipelines, as well as data jobs, SQL databases, and so on. As well as on the side of analytics, it's going to be AI, chatbots, as well as process mining, the technology that I have been working quite a lot with. So this is the landscape. This is the topic of today's conversation, let's say, on the bird's eye view. And now I would like to talk into a bit more detail about several parts of it. So first and foremost, you have to know how to get the data, which kind of tech you need to use to get and store the data. And well, frankly, this is the part that probably is given in your company, depending on which kind of customer service system you're using. Here on the slide, you can see ServiceNow, BMC Remedy, Salesforce for services, as well as Zendesk. Those are just exemplary systems, of course. Those are the systems that I have worked hands-on with. Of course, you can have many different kinds of service systems. These are here only as an example, I repeat. So whatever you're using in your department will be essentially your data store. At the same time, I wanted to give you a little bit of the overview of these systems so that you have a better understanding how to use them in terms of AI and data analytics. So here you can see a simple comparison table that talks about advantages and disadvantages of those systems. For example, the ServiceNow system has a pretty clear data model. It's clear which kind of objects and tables the system have, how they're related to each other, and so on. Moreover, ServiceNow has built-in integrated AI services, to some extent at least, into the system. For example, things like major incident detection is already in the ServiceNow system, which is, of course, a big advantage. Some of the simplest use cases you can already implement directly in the system. Another advantage of ServiceNow is the Now platform, where they publish different kinds of apps. Disadvantage is that they have a pretty confusing API. The API is the application programming interface. It's a programmatic way, automated way to get the data out of the system. For BMC Remedy, it's simple. clear data model is an advantage, and direct database access, so you don't necessarily need to use an API to get data. Disadvantage is that the AI proposition is only focused on operations. There is almost none, there is some, but almost none modeling capabilities in BMC Remedy. For Salesforce, clear data model, again, big advantage. Generally, it's an advantage of cloud-based system. Let's say, as you see, clear data model is advantage for all of them, which might not be the case, let's say, for SAP customer service system, if you use that one. Another advantage of Salesforce is the built-in AI called Einstein, which is pretty powerful. At the same time, is rumored to be unreliable, that many people have problems with loading big data sets to integrate the data there. And I personally find their API extremely confusing. They have 20, 30 different APIs for different kinds of requests, which is difficult to manage in productive situation. And Zendesk finally is a very lightweight system, the simple one, but the disadvantage is that there is no built-in AI capabilities. All right, that's with the systems. And then you say, all right, great, Dennis, we have a system already. We are using one, we're not going to change it, and I'm not asking you to change actually. But you will ask me, all right, we want to expand our AI capabilities and put data somewhere. How do we do that? And well, for that, you need to use ETL or ELT software, as it's been called recently. It's basically about data extraction, data integration. Here you can see also four tools: MuleSoft, Talent, Stitch, and OpenBridge, which are pretty popular on the market. The differences between them are essentially in which kind of systems they can integrate, where you can get data from. And the difference between ETL and ELT, basically it's in the order of operation, right? In the ETL, you do the extraction, transformation, and loading of the data. In the ELT part, you will do the loading before the transformation. Why it's that? It's kind of a change of a data paradigm that has been relatively new, let's say in the past 4 or 5 years. It's become pretty common because of the new kinds of databases that are now being used for data analytics. And these databases you can see on this slide. So how to store the data. There are different possibilities. I have shown here 4 very different kinds of databases. So PostgreSQL is the classic relational database that you have probably all used or have seen at least. Those databases are mostly at the core of many IT systems. However, those databases are usually considered transactional. So they're used to record a transaction, for example, record a ticket, but they're not always the best choice for analytics because they tend to be relatively slow in terms of different analytical requests compared to other kinds of databases. And Vertica-like databases, for instance, that you can see on the slide as well, are so-called columnar storages. And when you use columnar storage databases, you can do many kinds of analytics much faster because you can perform aggregate operation on the whole column instead of getting millions and millions of rows from the normal row-based storage. Thanks to Vertica, also in this kind of databases, also this ELT paradigm shift in data integration is taking place because many people right now, they actually don't need to work on the data and transform the data before it gets into the database because it's actually fast to do this on the database. You can also see the other types of databases such as MongoDB, which is a so-called document database, basically JSON-like format that is being stored. It's pretty flexible in terms of that you're more flexible, more kind of free with terms of structure of the data that you have. That is sometimes useful for analytics. At the same time, you have to understand that most of the machine learning algorithms, they're working on tabular data. So if you're using database such as MongoDB, it might be the case that you need to still transform the data in your development environment. Hive or Apache Hive is a big data kind of database. It uses SQL-like syntax and is used mostly for big data analytics. So if you're talking about terabytes and terabytes of data, that's probably the database that you should be addressing. Also, Hive is integrated with Spark machine learning which is a Spark machine learning library that allows you to build machine learning models kind of in the integrated way with Hive. What you have to consider by choosing database. There are many things, because all of these databases can be used in one or another way for data science and AI. It depends on the business goal that you have, right? If you're doing the pilot project, the small one, and you haven't implemented Apache Hive, well, my best suggestion would be just to use Postgres or another relational database. It might not be the fastest, but if you're just doing the pilot project, it's usually good enough. Sometimes you can even go without a database, but with CSV files. Do you plan the pilot or productive implementation? Big question. If you're planning a pilot, you might, for example, use, as I mentioned, Postgres. But in that case, you might not even need data integration tools such as Talent or Stitch Data that I have mentioned 2 slides before. You also need to know how much data you have to manage, what I mentioned about Apache Hive, big data, volumes, different databases, and also different formats that you have, because for different kinds of storage, you might need different kinds of databases. Well, if you're working with audio files, for example, then probably a relational database is not going to be a good choice for you. All right. Next point is how to analyze the data. So imagine you have data in the pipeline. You have stored it somewhere in a database, and now you want to throw some machine learning at it. How can you do that? Well, there are many different options on the market. Honestly, an uncountable number of options. I have just shown a couple of machine learning platforms right here. So the platforms from the big guys, from Microsoft is the Azure Machine Learning, from Amazon's SageMaker, and for Google it's the Colab platform. They offer a little bit different kind of tools and capabilities, of course, but their main idea is to provide you with the possibility to prototype, to train, and to deploy your models that you can use for whatever use case you're working on. For example, resolution time predictions that I mentioned. BigML and Databricks are also established companies. They're not really startups anymore, but much smaller compared to Microsoft or Amazon. They provide similar services, also kind of end-to-end pipelines. They provide data transformation, modeling, and so on. What is the advantage of these platforms compared to just working on your laptop, for example, is that you have multiple services at the same time, at the same spot. Usually you can pretty easily deploy your model into production from the test environment, which is a great thing to have. Because one of the problems of machine learning projects is that often people don't really know what to do with them after they build a prototype. So here on this slide, for example, you can see it's just a screenshot from the Amazon SageMaker Studio. This is how it basically looks like. Like on the left side, you can see your notebook, so-called Jupyter notebook, that you're prototyping in, building models, and so on. And on the right-hand side, you can already see some of the outputs in more kind of expanded way. You can see all of the charts. You can scroll through the tables and interact with the tables in there. So Amazon basically offers some kind of integrated development environment, an IDE in SageMaker, and much more functionality as well. So this is a powerful tool for your data scientists to build their stuff. But that's not the only way for them to build models. They can do this also with machine learning frameworks. Well, what is the difference? Well, essentially, the platforms, they also work with the frameworks, but the framework is something to build the model, let's say. It's the part that does the math, the calculations that are needed for one or another machine learning algorithm. But the frameworks are, again, these the juicy parts, so to say. This is where the calculations and the model training is actually taking place. There are many of them. TensorFlow, PyTorch are from the big guys. TensorFlow from Google, PyTorch from Facebook. And Stacy is the natural language processing library. H2O is another machine learning and deep learning framework. And when I say framework, what you can imagine would be something like that. You just sit and write code. This is also an example from the TensorFlow GitHub repository. You sit there as a developer and you write code. You would do the same in the machine learning platform, but if you're just working with the framework, oftentimes you're working on your local machine. It means that your processing capacity is limited. It means that you probably are working with a static, well, not always, but probably you're working with a static data set, CSV file. Another possibility to analyze data are the so-called cognitive APIs or intelligent APIs. There are a bunch of names from them. Essentially, those are, you can imagine them as packaged services on machine learning and AI. Also from the big companies, offers from Google, Microsoft, Amazon, and IBM are pretty well known. Those APIs allow you to execute a particular function. For example, transform an audio recording to text, so-called speech-to-text APIs. And with those, you usually don't need to train them. You can just send your file some piece of data and get back a prediction. So the advantage here, as you see, those are ready to use. You don't need to build your own models. The disadvantage is, of course, that, well, they're not so flexible. And you can imagine those as, well, as normal REST API. You would build a request for them, and you would send it, and you will get some response. That's this one is, I believe, from Amazon. Yeah, it's from Amazon. Amazon Machine Learning Services. So you may be asking, okay, Dennis, what are the differences? If I can build my artificial intelligence model, if I can do my churn predictions, my upsell predictions with any kind of tools, what is the differences? I have mentioned them already. Here, just to recap, ML platforms, you can prototype, train, and deploy. So it's kind of an end-to-end solution. If you're lucky, you will not need any other kind of machine learning solutions or services if you're using one of these. Frameworks are the actual coding and math part, so to say. This is what is being actually developed and written, and what actually builds and trains the model, what finds the weights in your neural network, for example, or what builds the trees in the random forest model, if you're using that one. And the cognitive APIs are packaged solutions which you can just take and use. You can send files and documents to them and receive ready-to-use answers. There is also another block of machine learning and AI solutions, which are about how to interpret and build conversations. Those are the chatbot tools. And on this slide, you can see plenty of them. The dialog flow, for example, is also from Google, with AI is from Facebook, Amazon Lex as well, obviously from Amazon, and Rasa and Chatfuel are the independent providers. And there are some differences between them. For example, Chatfuel is just a drag and drop tool in which any person, even without programming knowledge, can build a chatbot. Dialogflow with AI and Amazon Lex are cloud-based tools where you have some kind of cloud interface, cloud user interface, where you can build the conversation with the chatbot, while Rasa offers you on-premise natural language processing and the chatbot tools that you can build your chatbot without going to the cloud if your security, for example, measures force you to. All right, with that being said, I think we have a good point in time while talking about chatbots to switch to the interview with our expert Mercedes. So if you have the questions about the tools and everything, please ask them into the chat. I know it was a lot of information. I wanted to give you kind of overview of the whole landscape. If you have more questions, again, to clarify or anything, you can ask them in the chat for sure. And now I would say, Mercedes, let's jump into the interview.
Yep.
Where's the slide? Yeah, this is our slide. Let's jump to the interview. So, well, first of all, thanks a lot. Thanks for joining, for your time. I know you've been working quite a lot with chatbots, and this is a big topic in customer service, and generally, kind of has been pretty hyped topic in the past 3 to 4 years. The first thing would be probably if you could tell me a little bit, which kind of technology stack are you using mostly to build and deploy a chatbot? Are you using some of the tools that I have mentioned here? Are you using a different stack? And what, in your opinion, is necessary to build and deploy a chatbot?
Yeah, I used to work with Dialogflow. Is one of the one you mentioned. That's the Google tool. I've tried others as well, but finally I decided to work with that for different reasons.
Sorry, Mercedes, can you speak a bit louder? I cannot hear you so well.
Okay. Can you hear me better there?
Yeah, much better. Thanks.
As I was saying, I'm working mostly with Dialogflow. Do you want me to say the reasons or?
Yeah, sure. Tell me why.
Okay. I tried different tools, and finally I chose that one because it has a very user-friendly interface. So the learning curve is quite short, and you can have people working in the dialogues that doesn't need to be a programmers. They can be conversational designers. And also it's got a lot of integrations with many different platforms like Facebook, Slack, Twitter, Telegram, website, or even for voice you can integrate it in Google Assistant. And
And can you please probably explain to the participants what is a conversational designer? I'm not sure everybody knows.
Yeah, well, for the chatbots, you have a backend where it's all the code with the programming and where you call to the CRMs or the APIs that you need or the databases, but you need someone that creates all the dialogues, and that's the work of the conversational designer. It's usually, well, it's a new profession, so most of the people that's working there, it's people coming from design, like UX designers that have converted into GUI designers, and also people from linguistics and translators, web content editors, mostly from humanities, and they just do all the dialogues. It's like if you were doing the dialogues for a movie or something like that, you need to do all the conversational flows.
Okay. And you say these dialogues and conversations, and how do you do them? How does design look like?
Well, you can do that with NLU and NLP tools like Dialogflow, or for example, with AI, the other one that you put from Facebook, you can do it with that as well. Amazon Lex, all of those tools have a user interface where you just go creating all the dialogues that you need to the conversation. Depending on the needs of the client, you just make an architecture with that, and take the user to what he or she needs.
Okay. So it's as I understand, you don't necessarily need to program to design a conversation, but to build the whole chatbot, you do need to do programming, right?
Yeah, that's
okay.
Right.
Okay. And how do you get the data that you start with while building the chatbot?
Okay. The data, you have two kind of data. One is the concepts that you need the chatbot to understand. For example, if you've got a shop and the chatbot is going to sell products, you need the chatbot to understand the different kind of products that is selling. So when the user pronounces that word, I mean, if the user says, I want a t-shirt, a black t-shirt, you need the chatbot to understand t-shirt, and you need the chatbot to understand the color black and all that. So for that, you have something called entities, and you can take all those data usually from your database or CRM. You just import it and train the chatbot with that. and then you have another kind of information that is usually other kind of information that you have in your database, like and that is usually updated regularly. So like prices or dates for something or things like that.
Okay.
And that kind of data, you just have to make a call from the backend of the chatbot to the API of your CRM or your database and consult it.
Okay. Okay. Well, so which kind of tools from those that I mentioned do you think are useful for building a chatbot? You mentioned the databases. Which kind of databases would you be working with mostly?
Well, it depends on your needs, but for example, MongoDB could be fine, one that you mentioned. Also,
Which one, sorry?
MongoDB.
Ah, Mongo, okay.
That would be fine. I work in several chatbots that work done with that. If you want something, it's the same like for the background, you can use different platforms. For example, Dialogflow. The most usual is to combine it with Google Cloud Platform, but you can use other platforms if you want. You can combine it with Amazon Web Services or with Heroku or whatever. It's very open. And also for databases, you can use any known SQL database. And also it's very interesting. For example, if you have a record of all the conversations for the chatbot, so you can then analyze all that information. For that, is better if you use something related with big data, like BigQuery or any of the ones that you mentioned there.
Okay. Okay. Good. Well, in my experience, technology stack is a thing that depends a lot on what company already has. I would say so. As I mentioned in the beginning, for instance, if you have ServiceNow as your customer service system, you don't need to change to BMC Remedy or the Salesforce for Services to start building AI or start building chatbots. At the same time, I think it's important to understand which kind of tools are being used. So thanks for mentioning Mongo. I haven't worked with Mongo actually too much, but glad to hear that it's being used for chatbots actively. Okay, and you mentioned Dialogflow is the main tool that you're using, and it's one of the favorite tools. What are the specifics of Dialogflow apart from the integrations and the user interface?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Yeah, I'm asking about the Dialogflow. You said it's the tool that you're mostly using, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I was just asking what are the specifics of the Dialogflow tool and why would you suggest people to use it apart from the integrations?
Yeah, I would suggest Dialogflow mostly for the reasons I've said previously. It's very easy to use, and it's got a lot of integrations because other tools are specific to integrating. For example, Chatwell is to integrate in Facebook. Or another one for there are many tools for integrating in Facebook. But Dialogflow gives you a lot of integrations and many different ones. Like I don't remember now, but like 9 or 10 integrations different, and most of them are very easy. Just one-click integration with a couple of things that you have to do to integrate.
Okay.
Then it's multi-language and it's prepared for many different languages. Most of the languages that Google uses in their tools, and also it's quite cheap to start developing because it's got a free a free option that works mostly for small and medium companies. For most of them, they can use the free version. Just big companies would need the payment version, so that's great as well. And also that you can combine it with any backend. For example, if you are already working with Amazon Web Services, you can combine Dialogflow with Amazon Web Services. You do not need to have a specific backend, and you can combine it with any CRM that has APIs, or it's very versatile. So.
Yeah, I wanted to jump quickly. You mentioned a couple of times the CRM. Let me quickly jump to the slide because about the systems and the ETL. Just to come back to the idea, I've been mentioning last time on the use case seminar that it is important to integrate the data, because for some cases, for example, such as upsell predictions, you might need to integrate the data from the chat as well as data from the CRM system, because you need to know where your customers are, which kind of step of the journey they have. I like that you mentioned the CRM data, because that's kind of the basis of some of the use cases that you need to have. This is also the reason why the ETL tools, such as these, for example, are in the picture, because they are part of the landscape. So imagine you need to get the data from a chatbot, and you need to get data from the CRM system. You would use one of these tools and store them in one of these databases to eventually apply some links to them. Just wanted to jump on that because data engineering, data integration is a big topic in AI projects, and people usually don't pay too much attention to it, although it takes up to 80–90% of the time of a data scientist. Okay, coming back to our conversation, I had a question to you about about our viewers. If you say, for example, okay, Mercedes, that's great. We want to build a chatbot, or we're thinking to build one. What would be your advice? Which kind of first steps, or like kind of mini project plan, but first steps for a company that wants to start with the chatbot development? What would be your advice?
Okay. First, you want to analyze for what you want the chatbot and in what platforms you want to integrate it, and depending on that, you can see all the tools that are available for development and choose the one that matches best for your needs. And once that you know that, you need to decide if you want to do an in-house development or just hire an agency to develop the chatbot. And depending on that, the things you need are different. If you want to do an in-house development, you need to hire a conversational designer, and then you need a programmer as well for the backend. It's very important, the conversational designer, and that he or she has experience, because the quality of the chatbot depends mostly on that. And then if you are going to hire an agency, it's useful to ask to the different agencies what technology do they usually work with, because many of the agencies are specialized in one technology or another. So it's good that you see that the agency that you chose is using a technology that goes that works fine with your CRM or with the technologies that you already have your database, and that they can connect everything and integrate it well.
Okay, and why is it so important? Why does the quality of the chatbot depend on the conversational designer? Could you elaborate on that?
Yeah, it's the programming for the chatbot. I mean, the backend code. It's not different from other areas. You just have a database. You just call APIs, and things like that. But the design of the conversation, it's very important that it's fluent and done in a natural way. So when the user is talking to the chatbot, especially in voice assistants, maybe it's not so much important in text chatbots, but if you're working with voice, the conversation has to be fluent, and having a good architecture in conversational flows and a good design is what makes that the chatbot responds appropriately, because otherwise it can be weird for the user when talking to the voice assistant. And also if the conversational design is not well done, the chatbot can get lost when the user asks for something and not give the adequate answer.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and I understand correctly, like conversational design, you mentioned it a couple of times, and I have been involved before in chatbots, but mostly as a meetup organizer. I have built myself only one chatbot. It was also with ChatFuel, so not real chatbot development, but rather like playing around. So when you say conversational design, what I imagine is kind of a branch and tree, depending on different questions of the user that lead to different answers. That's on one hand, right?
Yes, it's quite similar to that. You need to define the entities that you need, all the different concepts that the chatbot need to understand, and with all the synonyms. And then you have to do all the conversational flows to get the parameters from the user that you need to use in your backend, and to give all the answers.
Okay.
Use tools like this. I mean, you can do chatbots just with programming, with neural networks and all that, and you just train the chatbot with a lot of data. In this case, the difference is that you have the conversation more control, because you decide how the conversation is going to be, and also you can create a character that is going to interact with the user. We call it a persona, and with a name and an image, and you can give it like some characteristics, like if it's going to be older or younger, or it's going to talk more formal or more informal, or things like that, depending on the user that is going to interact with it.
Yeah. I remember, I think you mentioned last time we spoke about this.
Yeah.
Okay, great. I think, well, I had one more question. I mean, we're already kind of a little bit out of time for the interview, but we still have time until 7. So I wanted to ask one more question about the in-house and hiring consultants. You mentioned that those are kind of two paths, and for in-house, you mentioned hiring conversational designer and hiring a programmer. And for if you would hire a consultancy, you mentioned that you have to see their project, like the specialization, as I understand, because somebody can be building chatbots with dialog flow, let's say, as you do, and somebody else with other services. Can you help us understand what else is important when you're looking for a consultant to build a chatbot, like independent one?
Yeah. Well, besides of the technology they use, it's very important to ask for an example of chatbot that they have already produced, because there are many companies developing chatbots right now, and if you just do a search in Google, you will find thousands or more, but most of them doesn't have any chatbots in their web open that you can try. So always ask for a prototype, or better than a prototype, a chatbot that they have already developed for another company and that is public for the client, so you can try it, and in that way you can check the quality that they can offer.
Okay, cool. I think it's a good point. So I hope everybody who's interested in the chatbots now understands that after developing business idea, you need to see if you want to build this in-house or with an independent consultant, and how you have to proceed with choosing ones and why it's important. So For me, there was a lot of insight in this conversation, despite being in the chatbot industry somehow. So thanks for the information, Mercedes. That was a great interview. I hope participants, you enjoyed it. I would say we will go to slowly wrap up the content part, and then we'll go to the Q&A session. Thanks again, Mercedes. I will keep going to the presentation. Well, first of all, of course, you can ask questions to Mercedes or myself, or to Pau, of course. Now you would say, okay, what are the next steps? Now we've heard a lot about the use cases, Dennis, that you have. We've heard a lot about technologies that we can use. We've heard about ITSM systems, about data integration, extraction, data storage, and databases, about machine learning platforms, about cognitive APIs, about chatbot building tools, and all of that. What do we do now? How do we execute a project? Well, you can hear more about that at our third webinar. So a little bit of a cliffhanger here. We will be talking together with Olga about what actually needs to be done to implement AI and not mess up. How the project looks like, how the project plan looks like, what are the important milestones, and how to manage the whole thing. It will be still with the focus on customer service. So the methodology part is more general, I would say, but we're still focused on customer service to show you how it is related and how which kind of things in the context you need to look at while implementing AI customer service. And to prepare for that, to prepare for the webinar that will be taking place, that will be taking place on the 26th of May at 6 p.m. Central European Time again. To prepare for this webinar next week, what we are asking you to do is a little homework again. So I hope some of you have started working on the homework from the past webinar, which was to identify the top 3 problems in your customer service department. Now, please look at those problems again. And now the question is, which technologies of those that we have mentioned today can apply? Maybe you're using some of them already, like the IT service management system or ticket management system you're probably using already, probably using some kind of databases in your company, maybe even data integration tools. Think about them. Think about which technologies apply to enable your data science and AI journey. You can send me the list at the email dennis@holovatyi.com, and I will give you the estimate how they fit together. Also, please write, of course, the use cases from the first homework. If you write the use case and technologies, I will have kind of a good picture of what is actually needed for you, and can make a suggestion if this fits together. For example, if the database fits to your business case or not, and so on and so forth. So please do that. It is important for you to take small steps towards your first AI implementation. And with that being said, this is the end of the content part. These are the content details of all of us, of Mercedes, Pau, and myself. You can get in touch with us if you need. And right now, we'll quickly go through the Q&A session to see what you've been asking about. Because before that, I couldn't see the chats, unfortunately, because they would take up the screen. So the first question is, can we see the recordings in case they happened? Paul, did we do the recording this time? Do you know?
Yeah, we always do the recording, but we don't send it. So if anybody is interested, just send us an email, and we will send to him on request. So we'll make it public.
Mm-hmm. Okay. The next question from Frederic is it possible to easily integrate custom chatbot models into existing chatbot tools, chat tools like SendGrid, Intercom, and so on? Is it an overlap? I would wire this question to Mercedes, if you don't mind. Could you help me out here?
Yep. Well, I haven't done it, so I'm not sure about how easily is the integration. But if you can integrate the chatbot with anything that has an API and that you can call to it. For example, if you develop your chatbot and you have your own API in the backend, you can call to that chatbot from whatever. Like even if you have an app, a mobile app, you can call from the mobile app to the chatbot API and just receive messages. So I guess it could be easy. Yes.
Okay, great. Great, I believe so too. I think I've even seen somewhere intercom bots, if I may be mistaken. Like, don't quote me on that. But yeah, thanks, Mercedes. Pedro is asking, what is a good strategy to ensure that the industrial property of data and insight remains with the company and not with the email providers such as AWS, Google, and Microsoft? Well, frankly, your intellectual property rights always stay with you. If you use their machine learning services to train your models on your data, the data and the models stays with you. To ensure that, legally speaking, you have to, of course, look at the terms of service in terms of use of each of those services. But I have never heard that Amazon or Google, Microsoft would be like stealing or looking over your company data. No, well, Google looks at your private data, right? They know where you're running around and so on. But as far as I know, they don't do that for corporate data. In any case, the good strategy is to talk to your lawyer for sure, not to a data scientist, if this is the main concern for you. But generally speaking, they never claim your intellectual property. One more question from Pedro. How to convince traditional customer service and sales to embrace this machine learning pilots? Well, that's a good question. That's also the question that is often difficult to answer. The approach that I try to use is to find the so-called champion. I've been mentioning this, I believe, in the very first webinar back in March or beginning of April. The champion is a person in the department that really likes it for whatever reason. Maybe they want to develop their career. This is usually a good lever to tell somebody that they can bring their career higher up the ladder. Maybe the person is just genuinely interested in technology. Maybe the person has worked with AI before. So this champion would be somebody who protects the idea, who drives the project forward. Usually it is actually enough to have just one person who's really interested, because when you have the insider, well, in my experience, it's relatively easy to do the pilot project. It's sometimes not easy to do a production rollout because they're longer and more expensive, but the pilots are usually relatively smooth and easy to implement. I hope I answered your question. Maybe you meant something different with traditional, with the word traditional, quote unquote. If you did, please specify more. I can come back to your question. That was from the Q&A session. No, we have more. Michael writes, GDPR compliance is a major concern for most clients. Are there any special concerns to be aware of with chatbots? And if so, do some tools offer better options for compliance than others for this? Well, I will answer quickly the question about the data science part, and then we'll forward to you, Mercedes, about the chatbot part. In data science, yes, if you want to do data science, you would need technically a special permission to do that. Usually most companies actually have some kind of clause that you can interpret as analytics and use the data. You would need to process the data in terms of anonymization and so on. There are other ways to do that. For example, you could use transfer learning, which is when you train the models on-prem, that the data is not going anywhere, and only models are sent to the cloud. If this is the concern, if the actual data is the concern, you can use so-called synthetic data. So you can generate new data that is not real, but has the same distribution as the old data. And with those things, you can help your GDPR concerns. But again, GDPR is such a topic that data scientists have to work with all the time. But the more exact question for legal advice, you have, of course, to talk to a lawyer. Mercedes, do you have more information about the chatbot part of it, if you worked with this problem before?
Yeah. Well, it depends on the tool you're using.
Yeah.
For example, in the case of actions for Google Assistant, when you publish an action, you publish also information with it, and you have to add a document explaining all the information that you're getting from the user, and for what are you using that information, and with whom are you sharing that information. So that could be similar to the web pages. And if you have a web chatbot, you can do the same in the interface, in the chat interface. And also you can advise if you do not take information like personal information from the user, but you are saving all the conversations to analyze later. You can advise the user when the chatbot starts the conversation and say just like, I remember you that all this conversation is going to be saved in order to improve the conversation. Or if you are asking information about the user, to make a profile and give like more customized conversation to the user. You also to ask for its acceptance, so he can just have to give you the permission. And yeah, there are many things. And also you have to also check that if you are using the cloud, that the cloud that you're using is GPRD compliance. Yeah.
Okay. Great, thanks, Mercedes. Just quickly, we have just one more question. Well, first of all, that some people say that it was hard to hear Mercedes. Sorry for that. We tried to fix it with the microphone. I personally could hear you perfectly well. I hope for other participants it was also okay. That's just so you know that we at least saw it. Hope it was still okay. The question from Ishtiak. Hi, my question is from commercial perspective. What's the difference in chatbot from text to animation to live video in terms of implementation and cost? Well, I mean, I think the first obvious thing is that chatbot is interactive. It can do things with the customer that you're working with. I'm not sure, Mercedes, have you seen comparisons to chatbot to animations or videos, like in terms of cost or something?
You mean like using a video for advertising or a chatbot, or?
I'm not sure. Ishtiak, if you may clarify a little bit. I think it's I think what is meant here is using like creating videos. You say, so it was for advertising. Chatbot only by test. You mean so the chatbot that works only with text, or chatbot that works with live video, animation?
Okay, yeah, I understand now.
Yeah, okay, because I don't, to be honest.
Yeah, those virtual assistants,
Okay.
the ones that have a virtual character. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. It's more difficult using a virtual character, of course, because you have to make sure that especially if the animation is like performing and acting that they talk, because the gestures and must be accordance with what they are saying. Yeah, and in cost as well. And also there are just a few companies that do that. So the offer is
Okay. Okay, cool. We'll a little bit over time, so I think we'll wrap it up the round. Ishtiak, if you have more questions, would be great if you write them in the forum. I think Pau, you will wrap up the session and talk a little bit about the.
Can you hear me? I would like to say something that is very important.
Sure.
For customer service, yeah, I forgot to tell it before. In other areas, it's not so important, but in customer service, it's very, very important that the solution you choose gives the opportunity to change to a human agent. It's like if the chat doesn't have an answer, you can use sentiment analysis to see how the user is going, or you can just check that if the chatbot doesn't give the correct answer in 2 or 3 times, just pass all the conversation to a human agent. That's fundamental to avoid frustration from the user.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Cool. Thanks, Mercedes. Great thing about the human in the loop. So I will stop sharing. Pau, do you want to show something to wrap it up?
Yeah, well, thank you very much, Mercedes and Dennis. I think it's been an amazing session. Very interesting, all the topics around chatbots and about the technology stack, right? Where we saw that the big ones, like the Amazons, the Microsoft, and the Googles of these worlds are providing directly the tools, and you only have to interact via APIs. And then the whole fact that there is a new profession that arises that is not that obvious what kind of profile or how to find these profiles in the market, right? Which is this conversational analyst, and it's I mean, it's very important because in the end you have to understand with who are you talking, and you have to empathize and use the proper words with consumers and or B2B with clients, right? But it's not that obvious, and it's fantastic that we saw these new jobs rising, right?
Yeah.
That's incredible. Well, I mean, let's jump now to next. I think it's next the 26th to the next session, which will be more on the process and methodologies and how to manage a project like that. As we said the other day, we encourage you to use the what we call the employee the expert to expert platform, which serve to basically to interact, and if you have more questions, to put it here, and we will answer directly in the platform. And yes, let's see each other next day with the third track of the customer service AI webinars. With third webinar. Yeah.
Thanks a lot. Thanks, Pau, for hosting us. Mercedes for being our expert, and to all the participants for listening and to asking questions. It was a pleasure. And see you soon on May 26th. Bye-bye.